There we go. Thank you. Over to you.
All right, thank you very much. Just as a brief introduction, my name is Jilaine. I work for YWMP, which stands for Young Women's Music Project, which seems quite random that we are running a project that delivers sanitary products and nappies around the city. But I'll explain a little bit more about that later. Yes, so I'm talking today about our project called Wings, which is an Oxford-based project. So to start off with, I'll just talk a little bit about period poverty. I may have to move the videos around because it kind of covers my text. Hopefully it's okay for you. Yeah, that's okay. Okay, good. So to start off with, period poverty is an issue of being unable to access sanitary products, having poor knowledge of menstruation, and this is often due to financial constraints. That's probably the biggest part behind it. This issue has grown over COVID-19 and the lockdowns a couple of years ago. So I just thought I'd share some stats on how people have been affected, and yeah, they're quite high, like 3 in 10 people struggled to afford or access period products during the lockdowns. And then of those, 54% said they were using toilet paper as an alternative. Other things were used as well as alternatives to the period products. Yeah, and so there are a few studies. These are all UK-based studies. So one by WaterAid found that more than half of people who menstruate experienced increased challenges managing their periods over lockdown. So that was either due to closure of places that provided free products, as well as access to education and healthcare. Because they just didn't access the places that they would learn about these kinds of things. It also impacted the number of donations that were given to places that provide period products for free. Again, so fewer people were able to access them. And oops, went too far. And there were also restrictions on the number of products that people could buy. So in terms of things like toilet paper, nappies as well for like childcare, and yeah, limits on how many, which is a struggle for people if they have multiple people within their household that needed these products, like not only being able to buy a certain number, also reduces. As well, digital poverty does reduce access to information, and this is something that is not just exclusive to the lockdowns, but people not having laptops or access to the internet, being unable to kind of learn about these kinds of things. I don't know if it's changed, but for me, when I was in school, I remember maybe 1 or 2 lessons on periods. There wasn't very much information about it. So yeah, most of it for me was kind of through my own research, I think, for a lot of people. And like, if you don't have access to that, then yeah, that does really limit the amount of information that you learn about it and your body. Just some more stats here. So these are kind of ongoing, not just exclusive to the lockdown, about the 1 in 10 people can't afford to buy menstrual products at all. They have other priorities and they'll be using other things in place of sanitary products. Consistent problem. I was quite surprised by the amount of the average spend on period products over a lifetime. That seemed like quite a lot to me compared to like, the amount that it takes, the cost of study and things like that. Like, that's quite a significant amount of money that you have to kind of fork out. And for some people, it will be much more than that. Everybody is different. Another thing that is quite an important issue related to period poverty is people missing a day of school due to their period, or like missing multiple days. Like if you're in pain, which we'll probably talk a bit more about in the other talks. But yeah, if you're missing those school days, then that can have a longer term impact in terms of like your education, and then that's correlated with your lifestyle afterwards, and income later on and things like that. So it can create much bigger issues down the line. At YWMP and Wings, we believe that access to sanitary products should not be considered a luxury, because it does have a huge impact on people's mental well-being and physical health, as well as limiting their ability to study, work, exercise, or leave the home, whether that's going to school or going to work. Like, it does have impacts beyond just like the inconvenience of not having a pad to hand when you need it. It's a much wider impact than that. So that's what we stand by. Nobody should have to choose between eating that week versus affording period products or nappies. So we launched the project in 2021 to support people in Oxford who menstruate or have young children and cannot access sanitary products or nappies. So we're a relatively young project, still quite small scale, but growing, definitely growing, due to like the more that we speak to people, the more we realize the need for it. Originally, it started out as we are a music project. A lot of participants that come to the project were kind of voicing the issues that they were having. So that was what kind of made us realize that it was an issue, like young people missing school because of this. So it started off like incredibly small scale, where we would just kind of use donations to like buy in products for them and kind of send them home with them and things like that. And then they kind of the word spread a little bit, and the more that we kind of had awareness of this as an issue, like the more we realized that it's not uncommon. It's not just the participants coming to our project that are having these issues. And locally, we found at the time, there's more being done now, which I'll talk a little bit more about at the end. But at the time, there weren't that many resources that were providing these products to the people that needed them. And the projects that were going on, it was hard to access or find in some cases. Things have changed a bit now, which is very good. So what does Wings do? We collect donations. We have several donation points all across the city. We order in stock when necessary, because we have a recipient list of people that we deliver to. So every month, usually the first week, moment it's about 200 more, maybe, a little bit more than 200 sanitary and childcare products, which we deliver to people that that struggle to access them. So we have the same recipients each month, and we try to deliver them the same products each month, but it does depend on donations and what we can access as well as a project, based on our funding and things like that. But so every month recipients receive the products from us. Here's some feedback that we've had from some of the recipients, which is nice to hear. This picture is Ellie from Headington School and made a campaign where they raised lots of donations and collected lots of donations from the students, which was great. That was at the end of last year. So we got some good donations and have had some good campaigns for that. So just a bit of signposting if you are struggling to access sanitary or childcare products, because it's not just sanitary products. We started off just delivering sanitary products, but it soon expanded into nappies. So it's mainly pads, tampons, and nappies that we deliver. We do have a waiting list at the moment, and it is currently full, but we're working through it. We've received some funding recently, which means that we are able to grow our capacity, and we have done so already over the past few months, added people to our recipient list to be able to meet the demand. But if you do have need for these services, then you can get in touch through the email address, which will I'm sure will get sent around as well at the end. And yeah, we'll keep you posted on when we have capacity to add you to our recipients list for free monthly deliveries. In the meantime, Oxford City Council are providing some free sanitary products in public buildings and toilets, including community centres. I think there's a list of community centres that they're available at, but I have to double check on that. But yeah, definitely Rose Hill Community Centre. I think that's where they're all stored. So there are some there. Community fridges as well is a good place to be aware of if you are in need or struggling. Another thing, if you're interested to volunteer, we are always very interested to have volunteers join our volunteer team. We rely on volunteers really. There's two of us that run the project, and the project is growing. So we do rely on our volunteers to both package up all the products, the nappies and the pads and the tampons, package them up for each delivery for each person. And then different volunteers or some of the same volunteers deliver them the next day as well. So we're based in the community works. You can see here, so this is our volunteers coordinator, Hayley. Behind Hayley, there's a fridge. It isn't no longer on, so it's just a disused kind of industrial fridge, but that's where we currently store all of the products. They don't have to be kept refrigerated. There's no power, but yeah, that's where we're currently storing them. So we package them at Community Works as well. And then the deliveries, we've got one delivery weekend coming up this coming weekend. So if you're interested to volunteer with us, it would be packaging on the Saturday, delivering on the Sunday. We say to volunteers if they can pick up packages anytime between 11 and 1, and then they can deliver them at any point during the day. And the way that it works is there's no ongoing commitment. We have a rota and it's got listed the postcode and the size of the package, because some of them are, like nappies are pretty bulky, and like we wouldn't want somebody to turn up on a bike and then struggle to carry like 5 packs of nappies or however many. But yeah, so the information that we give is like the postcode, the size of the package, and yeah, and then you can put your name down to deliver any that are, yeah, like near you or convenient for you to travel to. Yeah, no ongoing commitment. It's just every month we'll send out a rota. We do have an upcoming event in March at the Community Works, but we'll spread more information about that nearer the time. But we'll be giving some talks, and you can come and see all of the products and like how we package them and ask any questions there as well. Well, you can ask some today, but if you have more, then come along in March and ask them then. There are some perks of volunteering. So we give you a little like goodie every time you come a volunteer. So it could be edible, it could be like tote bag or something like that. Since we are run by YWMP, the music project, we do give our volunteers free tickets to any events that we're running, like our musical events and things like that. Yeah, so if you're interested to volunteer, hit me up at wings@ywmp.org.uk. The other way to contribute to this project, if you're interested, would be to either donate products or set up a donation point at a workplace or at a school or anywhere that you want to. So this is where we collect our donations. The biggest one is Tesco Superstore in Cowley Retail Park. We've got a big basket by the tills, like opposite the customer service kiosks, where yeah, if you're buying some products for yourself and have the means to, then we'd be very grateful if you can just buy one extra and pop it in the basket, and that will go to someone who will be very grateful for that. We currently have a donation point at Flo's Cafe in the Wings cargo bike. I haven't spoken about the cargo bike, but we do also have a cargo bike which can be used for deliveries If anybody wants to volunteer and do some deliveries using a cargo bike, then that's also an option. And we're currently in talks about renting out the cargo bike, possibly like for use other than volunteers. But yeah, that's kind of a work in progress. U Underwear in the Covered Market, the Star Pub on Rectory Road, Peloton Espresso, Oxfam Superstore, and Make Space 1 Aristotle Lane, which is where YWMP headquarters and studio are based. That's currently it. We're probably hopefully going to set one up at the Community Works as well, where we're based. But at the moment there are donation points. I think that is everything at the moment. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. I can also talk a bit more about YWMP if need be, but yeah, as always, you can email me at Wings and I'll pick up on it.
Can you see that all right?
Yeah.
Yeah, looks like it. Okay. Yeah, thanks for having me here today to talk about endometriosis and my experience with it. I just wanted to start by saying just about this presentation. So I'm going to be talking about people who have endometriosis. If I end up saying women who have endometriosis, I probably mean people because I want to be inclusive, but it may be that I slip every now and then. And then just a slight trigger warning that I will mention infertility. So that can be a sensitive issue, but it's just a mention. We will not go to it very deeply. So this is a safe space for that. And then, of course, I am not a medical professional and I cannot give any medical advice. And there's nothing like that included in this one. It's just facts about endometriosis and then my own personal experience and what I have learned on the way that I hope will be helpful to hear. And if you didn't know, endometriosis, it's a condition where tissue similar to the lining of the uterus starts growing elsewhere in the body. Quite often it's the pelvic region, but it can actually grow absolutely anywhere else as well. So that's the condition if you didn't know. And I'm going to start by saying 5 things that I wish I had known before I was diagnosed and before I knew that I had endometriosis that would have really, really helped me along the way. And the first thing is that the periods should not be painful. And if there's one thing that you remember about this presentation about endometriosis, I hope that you remember this one, because it's a big myth that it's part of just being a woman or a person, that your periods should be painful and that's just normal and you should take it. But actually they should not be painful. They shouldn't be painful in a way that you can't work, you can't study, you can't go to school, you can't go out with your friends, that you have to stop doing things. So if they are that painful, then there's something going on. It shouldn't happen. And I wish that I had known this, because so many people told me that it's just normal and you're a bit weak or all these things, but periods should not be painful. And I hope now that they do period awareness and education at school, that they would tell this to people, but at least in my time, it was not said this way. The other thing that I wish I had known is that you have a right to a diagnosis if your periods are painful and if you have other symptoms or even just one symptom like that. And I wish I had known that, to really believe myself and to know that I have a right to a diagnosis. And what I learned on the way, that you're going to be fobbed off again and again. They will dismiss your symptoms, especially as women, it's really difficult to be believed sometimes, and especially our pain. There's a real pain gap, that our pain is not taken as seriously. So find the experts who listen to you. If your GP doesn't listen to you and your symptoms and won't investigate, then change your GP. Keep looking, keep going until you find that person who believes you, because I found that that is really the way to get through and get that support as well. There's charities and I have resources at the end where you can find information, but keep going, believe yourself, because that's what's important. Because your symptoms are real. You're not making them up. they are real. You know your body better than anyone. People, we don't fake our symptoms. And so what I really recommend is to keep a symptoms diary, to write down what it is that's happening, when, what does it feel like, which part of your body. And there's a good symptoms diary template on Endometriosis UK website that you can use as well. It really helps to make your case when you have 10 minutes with your GP, or if you have 10 minutes with your gynecologist. It makes a difference. And I wrote down some of the symptoms for endometriosis because I didn't know these, and these are some of them. You may have others, and I'm just going to read them through. So painful periods or heavy periods. It's hard to know what is heavy periods, but if they're heavy, then that's one of the symptoms. Pain on ovulation, spotting or bleeding between periods, pain during or after sex, infertility, painful bowel movements, symptoms of irritable bowel, diarrhea, constipation, bloating, bleeding from the bowel. And this is already something that I really didn't know, that bowel symptoms might be a symptom of endometriosis. There are so many of us who are misdiagnosed with IBS. And in fact, it was always endometriosis. Or you may have both, but these are also endometriosis symptoms. Pain when passing urine, so because it can also start growing in your bladder. Back pain, leg pain, pelvic pain, fatigue and depression. And these are the most typical symptoms, but there could be others because it's very individual. It's also good to remember that these could be symptoms of some other condition. So it might not be endometriosis, it might be something else. But it's good to know that it's one of the options if this is if these are what you're experiencing, or some of these, because it is very, very individual, the symptoms we get when we have endometriosis. But I wish I had known this list, because it has, finally, when I got as far as knowing it was endometriosis and reading more about symptoms, it was really surprising to see some of these for me. The other thing that I wish I had known is that endometriosis doesn't always or even often show up in ultrasound or MRI, and they may even miss it in the surgery if it's very microscopic, that they can't see it. I wish I had known this, because there are so many of us, they tell us that your ultrasound is fine, there's nothing there, you don't have endometriosis. That's not true. It may be that you don't have it, but you can't be sure on the basis of ultrasound, because it may be so small, or it might just look like normal tissue, like it all sometimes does. So they can't always find it in ultrasound or even MRI. So I wish I'd known that. It would have saved some time for me. And then finally, I wish I'd known that it is as common as asthma and diabetes. So 1 in 10 women assigned as birth women have it. So it's really, really common, and I wish I had known this. And it's surprising to me always that there's such a low awareness about endometriosis, including myself. It took so many years to even know about it, that I wish I had known about it. The average diagnosis time in UK is 8 years currently. So from when you get symptoms, you start going to your GP. It takes 8 years to get a diagnosis on average. For me, it took 25 years. So, and it's not even uncommon that it takes that long. So yeah, these are all the things that I wish I had known, because I think I would have got there much quicker than I did. Then finally, when I was diagnosed, there were things that I wish I had known, or somebody would have told me quite soon from the beginning when I was diagnosed. And the first thing is that endometriosis is chronic, it's systemic, and it's inflammatory condition. And what does this mean? So first of all, it's chronic, and it means that there's no cure. Once you have endometriosis, you're always going to have it. And there's a lot of people, including medical professionals, who say that it can be reversed or it can be cured, and they suggest things like having a baby or having a hysterectomy, or that the menopause will cure it, but it's not true. You will always have it. It may be that your experience of endometriosis or your symptoms may change, but it doesn't mean that it has gone away. It's still there. So it will always be there, and that's something to just live with. But luckily there are treatments, so the quality of life is what we're aiming for. So even if it's chronic, there is hope. It's systemic, so it's not just about your reproductive organs. It affects your whole body. It can grow anywhere, and it's a multi-organ condition. And it's inflammatory. So it's an inflammatory condition. And remember that fatigue in the symptoms? You might be wondering, like, why? But you're constantly in inflammation. Like, I've had it over 30 years now, because it's one of the myths is that you can't have endometriosis as a teenager. But in fact, the research says that for most of us, it starts when we're teenagers. And I've had it since I was, maybe hard to say, but around 12, 13. So I've had it over 30 years. And yeah, constantly an inflammatory condition. Yes, I'm tired. It's really tiring to have that going on in your body all the time. And this is something I wish I know, because then I can also look into like anti-inflammatory lifestyle choices for myself that supports my well-being. Another thing, I wish I had known that I need an individual long-term treatment plan, because often when they find out you have endometriosis, they kind of well, the typical things they suggest are hormone treatment. They may talk about surgery, laparoscopic surgery to remove it, and sometimes even hysterectomy, which is a really big thing. Induced menopause is an option. And yeah, there are different options, but to find out what works for you, you need to really look at it case by case, because it's so individual. Where is it growing? How much is growing? What are your symptoms actually are? And you really find out by trying. And it needs a multidisciplinary team to look at you and have that individual plan of what works for you. And then you can make the decisions for yourself, what you want to try, because you don't know until you try. That's a tricky thing with endometriosis. There is no one treatment. You have to try to find out what works for you. And I wish I had known from the beginning that there is pelvic pain physiotherapy, because this is a thing for some reason, and I don't know why, they don't often tell you about as a treatment option. And because it does so much, there are NHS pelvic pain clinics that take a really holistic view. And I've written a list for myself, because they do so many things, and I've been lucky enough to get one. I mean, it's a long waiting list, but they're there. So there's physiotherapy exercises, there's muscle awareness, breathing techniques, there's pain management techniques and pain medication. They can look at it with specialists. The bowel health, bladder health, sexual health. They look at your whole life. They look at how are things at work, how is your social life, your free time, what your plans and what your goals are. They look at your relationships. And also they have pain psychologists who specialized in pain and how to cope with it. And they even have mindfulness courses for managing pelvic pain, which is incredible. You can get that on the NHS. And for me, pelvic pain physiotherapy and psychology was really transformational for my life. So I've tried different sort of surgeries, I've tried hormones, I've tried physiotherapy, I've had mindfulness courses. So it's been a really comprehensive way of really trying to tackle this. But I felt that pelvic pain physiotherapy was something that really changed my life a lot. And then, as you can probably hear, I mean, you learn a lot on the way, because you have to. Like, information will really empower you, but it also takes so much time. You really have to almost tackle it like a full-time job. I've used so many hours studying this and finding out and really knowing what could be right for me and looking at different options. So it's kind of just something that you have to do to be able to really move forward. So look for the information. And with that information as well, that I think this might be the last one if I remember, is that rely on others. You will find your community. And I think this is true. The kind of things that I've said here today, I think they also apply for other chronic conditions, is to find that information, how to deal with NHS, find your community, find the information, learn from others, because it really helps you. And I think that's something I would really like to encourage everyone to do, to keep talking to each other, because it will take you forward. And here are some resources that I wanted to share that might be helpful to you if you're looking to find out more about endometriosis. So Endometriosis UK is fantastic. They have a lot of information. They have helpline, they have a web chat, they have all sorts of things. They also have really good webinars. I really recommend them. There's a pelvic pain support network, also a charity. They have a list of NHS pelvic pain clinics. Have a look. There's Nancy's Nook, that's American site, has really good information about endometriosis. It's a learning library, and I found out a lot about there. And for if your child is not by choice, then I would recommend World Childless Week. There's a lot of us with endometriosis who struggle with infertility or not being able to have children. So I recommend World Childless Week as a resource for that. And yes, that's from me.
Thank you, Sari. I will just pause it. Forget.
Yeah, it's that option's disappeared again, which is annoying. Why is it not working now when it's working earlier?
I know. Typical.
Hang on. Files? No. That's weird. It's just not coming up. Okay, let's try something else. It's letting me share Chrome anyway, so let's see. Okay, we'll try it this way.
Okay, perfect.
Is that coming up all right?
Yeah,
okay,
that's fine.
let's see if
Thanks,
I can
Emma.
scroll through first. Okay, so hi. It means I won't be able to see the chat, so Joe, if you shout at me if anyone's asking anything as we go through. So hi, I'm Emma, and you can find out a little bit more about what we do at our website, which is listed there, managingthemenopause.com. The bulk of what we do is go and work with organisations of different shapes and sizes to do things like sort of general awareness sessions, lunch and learn style workshops, manager training, helping with policies, guidelines, that kind of thing. And I also work alongside my sister-in-law, Beth, who is a GP and a menopause specialist. So she kind of jumps in and does some great sort of Q&A sessions, sort of ask me anything. I'm an expert, so you can find out more about the various things that we offer there. I also do run, at the moment, just one in-person menopause support group, which is the second Tuesday of the month at Florence Park Community Centre. And I've got a newsletter as well that goes out sort of roughly fortnightly, which you can sign up to on the website. So I've tried to condense down, or I'm going to attempt to try and condense down what is normally sort of at least a 50-minute presentation into a much shorter presentation. So I'm going to kind of rocket through things at a fair pace. So please do, if you've got questions, obviously I can take them at the end. And if you want me to sort of elaborate on something as we're going through, I will do. So just to start with a few definitions, there are, I think, still a kind of reasonable number of people who may not have heard the term perimenopause before. So perimenopause is actually the period of time leading up to menopause itself. So that we might always also call that a menopause transition. And symptoms can be experienced for anywhere between a few months or for several years. And the average is sort of sits in that 4 to 7 year period. And menopause is technically just one day when it's been 12 months since the last menstrual period. So it's kind of a retrospective diagnosis that we're able to make when there's been 12 months of no period. If you go sort of 6 months and then you have a period, unfortunately, you have to then sort of start the clock counting again. And then postmenopause is any time after that 1 day. And we'll potentially now, many of us living a third of our lives in that post-menopause state. And there's interesting research still ongoing in terms of the sort of percentages of people still experiencing symptoms postmenopausally. It was sort of generally thought that for most people, the sort of symptoms would start to kind of ebb away, but I think we're actually seeing that there's still a good proportion of people who are still experiencing symptoms even after periods have completely ceased. One sort of misconception, and something unfortunately that even healthcare providers are sort of fobbing people off with, is that they can't be perimenopausal because they're too young. Well, actually, the average age of reaching menopause here in the UK might be 51, but around 1 in 10 of us will naturally go through menopause early, between the ages of 40 and 45. And that's not a small percentage, is it? So when you think that somebody could be having symptoms for as long as 10 years, it's quite possible that they could be seeing symptoms developing from sort of early 30s, but typically it would be sort of early 40s. And then around 2 or 3 in every 100 will actually go through menopause under the age of 40, and we call that premature ovarian insufficiency, or POI. And I've got a link in the slide at the end to a charity that provides great support for people going through that. Oh, hang on. Sorry. Okay. Another possible sort of misconception is that somebody can't be perimenopausal because they're still getting periods or even regular periods. So as you'll see from this diagram, which I hope you can see okay, you've got a sort of bright pink line, which is estrogen levels, and then a dark bluey purpley line, which is progesterone levels. And you can see that our estrogen levels kind of ramp up through our teenage years and then stay reasonably stable throughout our reproductive years, and then start going on this real sort of roller coaster ride as we go through perimenopause. The the progesterone levels aren't quite as fluctuating, but certainly do drop and do vary. But most of the time it is the big fluctuations from very high highs to low lows with estrogen that kind of then produce symptoms that people are experiencing. But it's perfectly possible for somebody to be perimenopausal but still getting regular periods. It may well be that the first some of the sort of the first indicators that somebody could see is that the periods will change, though, that they'll get sort of closer together or further apart, they'll get lighter or they'll get heavier. And as you can see from this lovely diagram, we have estrogen and progesterone receptors all over our brains, but actually all over our bodies as well. And when we come to the list of symptoms, you'll see all of the different places in our body that can be impacted by those sort of fluctuations in our hormones. Very, very briefly, estrogen controls things like our sort of thermoregulation that's controlled in the brain. So our body's ability to keep us in that nice sort of middle range of temperature that we like to be in. So hence the sort of the hot flushes. It also impacts on sort of the production of our happy hormones like serotonin, dopamine, noradrenaline. It impacts on things like collagen, on hyaluronic acid, and that that can obviously lead to sort of changes in our skin and in our hair, but also in things like tendons, for example. So we might be more prone to tendon type injuries. Estrogen's a real controller of inflammation as well. So when that's dropping away, we very often see things like joint pain, and that can also be sort of a function of that reduced collagen as well. Stereotypical symptom number 1 of menopause is obviously hot flushes, but actually not everybody will get them. I'm 51 years old and I've never yet had a hot flush. I might be jinxing myself there, but around sort of 15% of us will never have a hot flush. Night sweats are the sort of the nighttime equivalent. Sounds sort of reasonably benign, but for some people can be incredibly disruptive to sleep. You know, they might be finding that they need to change their kind of nightwear more than once during the night, change the sheets on their bed. Yeah, so obviously really disruptive if that's happening, you know, over and over again. Irritability and mood swings, I think people are sort of reasonably well aware of, but also that, you know, kind of rage that descends in sort of 0 to 100 miles an hour that I think sometimes really takes people a little bit off guard. Difficulties around sleep, again, very common, whether that's linked to the sort of the night sweats and disruption or not, and loss of libido. But actually, depending on the sort of the sources that you refer to, there are upwards of 34 symptoms. And I'll come back in a minute to just talk about the symptom checklist that we've got on our website. But anxiety is actually very common. So easily 60%, possibly even more, of people experiencing anxiety in perimenopause. And it's quite often, again, one of the sort of early warning signs. So people who've never really experienced anxiety before might find that it suddenly comes out of nowhere. And those who have experienced and lived with anxiety in the past may find that it really ramps up at this stage in life. Excuse me. Heart palpitations are very common, and again that can be quite worrying if you don't realise that it's linked to perimenopause and those sort of fluctuations again in hormone levels. Obviously it should always be checked out in case it's something else, but I think it's, you know, can be really quite scary if that's suddenly happening to you and you don't understand why. Things, sort of lots of weird and wonderful ones, like changes in our taste and smell, changes in our sort of sensitivity to noise. Again, you know, that can be quite problematic in the workplace. An increase in frequency of urinary tract infections, again, very common, because the, you know, the lining of the urethra is being sort of thinning, where the estrogen levels are dropping. It's therefore more prone to these sort of tiny micro tears and allows infection to take hold more easily. Flooding, for anyone who's not aware, is that sort of very heavy period bleed that can happen quite unexpectedly in perimenopause. So somebody might, for example, go for a month or two with no period and then find that they have an extremely heavy one, so much so that they could be bleeding through a set of clothes, bleeding onto a chair at work, that kind of thing. Again, you know, you know, something that if someone's able to work flexibly, work from home, that can make it easier for them to deal with that kind of thing. Going to skip over. So this is just a kind of, not entirely exhaustive list, but these are certainly the most common symptoms out of those sort of 34 symptoms or more. I probably haven't got too much time to kind of give you chapter and verse on HRT, but I've got some great podcast episodes that do really delve into this, talking about some of the myths and misconceptions around HRT, also talking, done a deep dive on testosterone for women, testosterone therapy, hormone therapy with Dr. Katie Barber from Oxford Menopause. So if you're interested in any of those, just drop me a question in the chat and I can send you some links. I can't see the chat at the moment. But very quickly, you may or may not have heard of the Women's Health Initiative study, which is coming up now on 22 years ago, that was widely publicised at the time, sort of flagging increased risk of breast cancer with hormone therapy, and the sort of those clinical trials were halted. as a result, and kind of prescribing levels for hormone therapy really just kind of halved overnight as a direct result of this. The study has since been sort of widely criticised, and the results kind of put in better context. Very, very briefly, the HRT that we're using now today, 22 years later, for most of us is vastly different. So body identical HRT through the skin, transdermally, and micronized body identical progesterone in the form of eutrogestan or similar, which is vastly safer. There are other flaws with the study, which I normally talk about in the sort of longer presentation. And again, if you're interested, I can sort of signpost you to some of these resources that sort of put the risk of breast cancer into context, because it's a very common concern amongst people who are sort of thinking, well, I'm struggling with symptoms, but I'm not sure if I want to go down the HRT route. Whether or not somebody chooses to go onto HRT, there are lots of other things that we can do to support ourselves, sort of tools in the toolkit. And lifestyle changes are ones that we talk a lot about, and that can be things like, exercise, which is, not just sort of helpful in terms of kind of helping control some of the weight that is very common for people to sort of put on at this time of life, but also in terms of strengthening our joints, strengthening our bones. One of the other things I didn't mention about that sort of dropping estrogen level is that estrogen is involved in our bone renewal, and our bones are constantly renewing themselves every day. So where we're getting that drop off of estrogen, we're becoming more prone to osteoporosis, for example. Nutrition, another big area that we can spend a lot of time talking about, but yeah, really making sure that we are prioritizing sort of not sort of depriving ourselves and going on sort of faddy kind of really calorie cutting diets, but making sure that we're really fueling ourselves well, making sure that we're getting enough protein into our diets, making sure that we're eating all of those kind of 30 plants a week that we know that we should be. Cutting out things like smoking can be really helpful in terms of that can be a trigger for hot flushes, and so can alcohol and caffeine. And then also alcohol, really is not our friend in midlife. If our livers are sort of focusing on clearing alcohol out of our system, then they're less able to clear estrogen, for example, and sort of control those peaks and troughs. And stress can be a real sort of issue that exacerbates a lot of those symptoms that we've looked at. We get a lot of questions around sort of supplementation, around alternative kind of herbal therapies, what works and what doesn't. Unfortunately, there is nothing that has been clearly shown through clinical trials to be, as effective as medication. Black Cohosh, I think, and St John's wort have some sort of limited good results in studies, but actually when we talk in our sessions about this, we really focus on things like magnesium, because a lot of us are magnesium deficient, and that can really help with a whole range of things, but in particular sleep, things like restless legs, joint pain, vitamin D supplementation. We all know that we should be supplementing with vitamin D during the winter months, but actually Beth suggests in her practice that if you're perimenopausal, you should actually be supplementing all year round, and a good omega-3 supplement to help with brain health and joint health. Cognitive behavioural therapy has been shown to have sort of limited good impacts especially for things like insomnia, and it can sometimes help with hot flushes and sort of calming those kind of reactions. So it's not necessarily going to take the hot flushes away, but it's going to help you not get into that sort of very sort of stressed fight or flight mode. And then There are other non-hormonal medications that can be prescribed, like venlafaxine, oxybutynin, and other medications for things like vaginal dryness for people who can't take HRT. And we've got new treatments coming online all the time. So the new drug Veoza, not available on the NHS yet, but again, treats hot flushes as they are basically manufactured, if you like, in the brain. Not yet approved for those who have had breast cancer, but I think research is ongoing. I'm going to gloss over this one because actually I think on the next slide, if you want to get this free download, PDF download, how to get the best out of your GP appointment, which includes a symptom checklist, that's available on our website, so you can sign up and get that. And then other good ways for checking, sort of tracking symptoms. There's the Balance app, that's free. And I think Stella also has a symptom checker. Daisy Network is the charity that helps people who are living with premature ovarian insufficiency. Women's Health Concern also has loads of resources available, as does Menopause Support, which also has a free 45, I think, or 43 page, very, very comprehensive PDF leaflet that you can download. Gives you a really, really good overview. And then some books. I have an extensive menopause library that I bring along to our drop-in group, but these are some of the ones that I really like. And yeah, if you want to find out any more about those, drop me a line. And I can't see the chat, but I can see some numbers, so I'm going to stop sharing. And that's my email address, by the way, if you want to get in touch, but I can also pop that into the chat once I've hit this button. Okay. Is